Hey, welcome back to the Group Project Podcast, episode number 47. Um, so today I was supposed to have Jenny Risner, who is the superintendent of schools at Ames Community School District, the home of Iowa State. But she texted me this morning saying she was a little under the weather, and we're going to reschedule. Also today, here in the Midwest, it's been a huge snowstorm that went through, and many schools across Iowa, across the Midwest, are actually closed. So we were closed here at South Tama County, and a number of other districts were just have closed up their doors. So kind of a weird day. And I kind of figured maybe the podcast wouldn't happen tonight. However, I've said this before on the show. I live literally a block from my office, and I I just felt compelled. Like, I wanted to do something. I wanted to come in, record a show. Um, I did a couple before winter or during winter break, a couple solo episodes, and those actually did really well. I wasn't sure how they would do, and the metrics behind those shows were actually really strong, and I got some good feedback. So I'm going to try to do another solo show here today with Jenny being gone. And again, I promise you, if you're here to listen to Jenny, who's doing great things over at Ames, I apologize. I promise you, we will have her back ASAP so we can hear about what she's doing there. But I decided I'm going to expand on a blog post that I posted a couple days ago, and the blog post was called "Don't Be a Cheap Boss," and I'm taking a little bit of a risk by covering this topic because I feel like money and schools and being bosses and talking about gifts, like, those things are kind of taboo or shouldn't be talked about in schools. So I'm sure there's like 10% of the audience right now who's tuning in and saying, like, oh my gosh, you're a superintendent, you shouldn't be talking about these things. And I just based on the reaction I got from the post, I really enjoyed writing that blog article because I felt like I was able to just kind of organize my thoughts and lay out my feelings a little bit about some things. I just thought, let's give this a shot. Let's talk about it for a few minutes. Let's bring some attention to the topic. And if nothing else, I can tell my story about how I went from being a really cheap boss and a really cheap person to somebody who I feel like I really try to show appreciation through gifts now, for our staff. So let me just talk about that transformation. Let me talk about some things to think about gift giving in schools. And hey, if you like it, great. If it means something to you, if you take away something and you feel compelled to do something maybe a little bit different in your practice in your school, great. I did my job. If you hate it and you think uh, it wasn't appropriate, I apologize. Maybe you just want to stop now and go back to a different episode. But anyways, okay. Here's the thesis. And if you read the blog post, I encourage you to go to my website, drjaredsmith.com. Read the article if you haven't already. But here's like the thesis statement. And the statement is, school leaders have a reputation for being inconsiderate and cheap when it comes to gift giving. So that's a thesis. That's a pretty bold statement. And again, don't, school leaders out there, listen, hear me out here. Okay. I'm talking in generalities. I'm not pointing any specific person out here, even though I'm going to talk about a few stories here. It's something that I've been terrible at, and I finally have had a little bit of awakening here, the last several years. Um, so let's talk about, okay, growing up. And I feel like, um, a lot of educators grow up in kind of in that blue collar, middle class, right? So that's where I grew up as well. So let's talk about my story growing up. And I'm going to kind of move back and forth here. I'm going to I'm going to go through this whole thing in one shot. I'm not going to edit. I'm not going to stop and put pieces together. I'm just going to give it a shot. So I'm going to have to jump around a little bit to kind of make the story make sense. So bear with me. But growing up, definitely middle class here in Iowa. We had everything we needed, but definitely didn't have all the luxuries that maybe some other Americans have. But really, a big turning point in my life was fifth grade. Our parents divorced, and we had everything we ever need. We had Nintendo, and we had food, and we got just everything we needed to be kids at that point. And let me be clear, I've got two brothers and a sister, so there's four of us. But in fifth grade, our parents divorced, and suddenly two different households. And why that's a big deal is because my dad was working my whole childhood, and my mom was a stay-at-home mom. So when they divorced and suddenly my dad was renting a place and my mom stayed at our old house, she had to make some money. So she actually and didn't have a college degree, and went and she became a waitress. Okay, so our mom with four kids, didn't have much money. Now I don't know how it all worked, but I know that my dad was giving mom child support. But there wasn't a whole lot of money there. Okay. And so my mom was a waitress, working her butt off for us kids, and money started getting really, really tight. And as a result, myself and my siblings all suddenly went on, a big indicator in schools of that poverty level, or it's not quite the poverty level, but it's getting close, is whether or not you're on free lunches or not. And so when that happened, and suddenly my dad again was completely in the picture, but he wasn't we weren't living with him. Suddenly we were on free lunches as a family. And so not a huge deal. A lot of people are on free lunches. Our district here is like, I don't know, 50, I'm forgetting what the free number is, 50 to 60%, somewhere in there. But 25 years ago, when I was in middle school and high school, the numbers were less, especially here in Iowa. And I don't know, we got on a real tight budget as a family. And because of that, we didn't get much for presents outside of Christmas and birthdays, and we didn't go on trips, and we really didn't eat out. So I guess our family just had this, we were frugal, and we made sure not to spend a whole lot of money on each other and just get the basic necessities, right? So I think and that happened for me middle school, high school. I started to develop this mindset where um, every dollar that I got use it wisely, and don't use it frivolously, and don't and really so that kind of going to a school that had a little bit of high class, middle class, a little bit of everything. My group of friends were definitely in the upper to higher class, and so it made things difficult for me. I developed this mentality of kind of being, and I'm going to use air quotes here if you can't hear me, of being cheap, of really trying to look to save money, not to use it. All my friends were going out to eat, sit down restaurants, and I would stay at home, or I would bring my lunch to school, whatever it might be. I mean, several different examples. So this cheap, this frugal mindset that many families, many educators have grown up with is something that I had coming out of high school. In college, and again, I'm going to just tell a few different stories, and then I promise you we will get into how this translates to my life as an administrator. In college, definitely had that same mindset. of kind of being careful with what I spent. Myself and my family, we all did. And when I got to college, very fortunate to have almost all my college paid for through good grades and test scores in high school. So I didn't really ask my parents for any money. I mean, they really didn't give me any money. And that's just kind of the way I operated. I didn't think that was something I should do when I had moved out, was to continue asking for money. So, again, was very, and I had a work study job. I worked in the College of Education at the University of Northern Iowa, and that, had some extra spending cash, but really, money was pretty tight in college as well. Um, so I was like, I mean, people knew me, and I don't know everybody else's stories. I didn't really think about that much in college, about whether or not my peers were getting money from their parents and how much they got. All I know is I was pretty much self-sufficient, and meant that I needed to really kind of watch what I spent. And so in college, again, there's probably, I did some stupid things. Who didn't? But I was definitely known as one of the cheapest people in college, for sure. When I still see my friends from college, they joke around about how if I didn't have a coupon, I wouldn't purchase a pizza. I wouldn't go. I know this is a family show, but I wouldn't go to the bars if I didn't have this coupon. It's kind of crazy. I could go into like probably half an hour conversation about these coupons that were handed out in the early 2000s in Iowa college towns, about going to bars for very, very, very cheap prices for many, many, many drinks. I will stop right there. But if I didn't have that coupon, I probably wouldn't go. I mean, that's how cheap I was. I think back to two other stories, and then I'll transition to education here. I remember when I got my coaching license, we had my buddy Dave DeYoung, who was education major, who currently is a education professor at South Dakota. We got our coaching licenses together in college, and he, having a nicer car than I had, he drove us down from Cedar Falls to Iowa City, 2 different weekends. And I want to say, it's about 70 to 80 miles, hour and 15, hour and 20 minutes one way. So you're talking about 5 hours worth of driving, 6 hours worth of driving. And at the end, though, after the end of the 2 weekends, I felt like I got to pay this guy some money for the gas money that he spent. And again, I had no clue at the age of 20, or I don't know what I was. I was probably 20. So I had no clue, super cheap. I remember giving him like a few dollars at the end and saying, "Hey man, thanks for the ride. Here's a few dollars," like literally like 3 $1 bills. And I mean, again, 5 hours worth of driving, that was probably like $40 worth of gas, I'm guessing. And I gave him $3, and I thought that was good. And I'm, to this day, almost 20 years later, I'm like embarrassed by not only him giving up his car, giving up being the one who would drive again, because my car was junky. And again, I could talk about that. People who know me and know my high school car and my college car would just be cracking up right now. But he gave up his car, gave up, said, "Hey, I'll drive." And that's what I threw him. It was $3. So again, I'm just trying to paint this picture of, as a youth and as in high school, like just this cheap mentality that I had, that I do feel like a lot of educators have. That's just the way a lot of us grew up. And finally, one more story here. So Ja Rule, who had some big songs back in the like early 2000s. He had a concert at Cedar Falls that I went to. That was a ton of fun. And Ja Rule I'm telling you, had some great songs. Like he was like from like 2001 to 2004, like had all the hits, and he was teaming up with J-Lo, Jennifer Lopez, and Ashanti, and he just had all the good songs. But my buddy said, "Hey, I'm going to go we have an extra ticket to Ja Rule. He's in Des Moines, which is like 2 hours away. Do you want to go?" And I said, "Well, how much is the ticket?" And he's like, "Well, we really need to get rid of it. We'll give it to you for $10. And I was like, $10, that's kind of expensive. I talked him down to a $5 ticket to a concert for Ja Rule, who, again, I don't know who you would compare to him to these days. I don't know if he's quite on Drake's level, but he was a pretty big deal back then, right? Um, Talked him down to $5. And even at $5, I thought, nope, I can't do it. I'm not going to spend $5 to go to the Ja Rule concert. The guy couldn't believe it. The word got around on our floor about how cheap I was. And took me a lot of years to shed that, um, to shed that, nickname. I don't know what the mystique of being cheap. So, okay. So now that you've got that in mind, let's fast forward now. So that was age of 21. I taught for 4 years, became an administrator at the age of like 26, pretty young. Right. And when I became an administrator, I still had this mindset where I don't, we just don't spend money. We don't spend money on things. We don't spend money on people. Um, and that's how I entered the world of administration. And beyond that, I mean, not only was and I've written about this, there's plenty of blog posts that you can read about how poor of a teacher I was and how poor of an administrator I was. I was just terrible at showing appreciation. I know I was. I mean, I'm sure I did some things here and there that probably were like, okay, that worked. But compared to where I'm at now, and again, I wrote a blog about, the 10 culture hacks and talked about all these different ways that you can show appreciation to staff and to secretaries. And so I just feel like that was about 12 years ago. I was just so bad back then at doing those things. But here's kind of where, okay, so I'm cheap up until this point, right? And then I work in a district, my first administrative job. There's a principal at the high school who does like all these things for his staff. And one of the things I remembered right when I started, he started as well. And he took all of his like staff to a restaurant / bar in the city that we worked in and said, "Hey, staff, get whatever you want. The first like $500 are on me." And coming from you heard my stories, and that's just the tip of the iceberg from the way I operated. To hearing that, I just thought this guy was nuts. I couldn't believe, like, what? You're spending that much money on your staff? You're crazy. Like, this is just unheard of. And he told me, like, this is just kind of like when you go into administration or you become a leader, like, these are the things you need to do for your staff. And at the time I didn't buy it. I just thought he was crazy. I will never do that. I didn't think that was a good way of showing appreciation. And I was firm that I would never do that. Well, it's kind of funny. His wife actually ended up being the secretary in our office like the following year. So a year later, we end up hiring his wife as one of our secretaries. We had 2 secretaries in our office. And I would hear about all of these things that principal would do for his staff, that principal would do for his secretaries. Because I would be curious. I'd be like, okay, what's your husband doing? What did he get the staff or the secretary or his secretary or whoever it is for Christmas or for their birthday? And he get these really nice gifts. And, I don't know exactly what I was getting our secretary is there, but I know those first couple of years, I, I, I'm sure they were super cheap. Like I might've brought them I might have brought them lunch or something, or taken them to lunch, one time on their birthday or before Christmas. And it might have just been like fast food or something. I don't know. And we're going to get to it in a minute. Obviously it's not about the cost. It's more about the thought behind it. But like, I started to learn, like, maybe I need to step up my game. Maybe my old way of thinking wasn't what it should be. Um, so I was in that position for like 2 more years with that secretary. And each year, I think I got better at giving, being thoughtful, thinking about birthdays, um, thinking about the holidays and getting like nicer things. And eventually I was, and I can't remember what I was getting, but I remember thinking like, you know what? Without these ladies, I'm going to use secretaries for an example. Without them, like, they're absolute lifesavers in the world of a principal or an assistant principal, in the world of an administrator. I mean, and I talk about this in the blog, like an effective secretary, which is what that lady was, that I worked with, is absolutely worth their weight in gold. I mean, they are so imperative, and so they guide your success so much as an administrator, that I started to realize, like, I really need to show her that I appreciate what she's doing. Now, by that time, I really had gotten, I also started writing some notes and doing some other little things of appreciation. So I was starting to get a lot better. And I was starting to see that when I would write words of appreciation that really were specific and timely and really spoke to the abilities of that secretary, as well as other staff in our building, it really had a strong impact on my relationship with that person, as well as their motivation towards the job and just their confidence in the job. So over those 4 years, and I was in that district for 4 years, over those 4 years, I came in super cheap and terrible at giving appreciation, to like 8 years of age, 29 years of age, 30 years of age, finally starting to act more like an adult. It's finally starting to act more, just do things that are a little bit more mature and a little bit more heartfelt. Um, so by the time I left, I feel like I was doing pretty good. I was making sure I was recognizing everybody that, working in a school, and in that particular school, there's probably 80 staff members and there's 2 administrators. And it's hard to show everybody, all 80 staff, appreciation. That's a lot. And I didn't know at that time really how to delegate. And there's a lot of stuff. I mean, a lot of things I would have done differently, but I was starting to make sure that the people who I worked closest with, that I was making sure that I did something for them, whether it was a combination of just showing them appreciation in different ways, and then also giving them timely gifts that made an impact. So I felt pretty good by the time I left that job and took my next job in the next school district as a high school assistant principal. But I remember that first year as a high school assistant principal. And again, this is where it gets tricky, because those of you who kind of can connect the dots and know where I've been can kind of like figure out who I've worked with. And again, I want to be clear. This is meant to be generalizations. I got to tell these stories to kind of drive home a point, but I'm not trying to take shots at people. I'm just trying to say that we can do better as administrators. So back to that first year. So we were getting ready, and I talk about this in the blog post. We're getting ready for that first holiday break with that staff that I was with in that new high school. And I want to say we had like 7 or 8 people who worked in the office. It's a bigger high school. There's like 1,100 kids. And I remember sitting at an admin team meeting, and we always had our admin meetings on Mondays. And like, I want to say the following Monday was Christmas break, right? Holiday or winter break. So we had a full week of school and then we were off for 2 weeks. And as an admin team, we kind of sat around and we talked about, okay, what can we do for our secretaries and our office staff? Like, what should we get them a present? And I came in with that mindset of, all right, like, what are we going to do? Let's do something really cool. Let's get them something that's really impactful. And but I didn't have much of a say with that group because I was the young one. I was the new one. And there were some people who had been there for a while. So they decided to get our group to purchase some donuts and rolls and juice for the group. And they thought, and I was in there too, and I agreed to it. And we said we would get some donuts and rolls and juice and put them in the lounge, in the conference room. And on Friday, our staff could enjoy the rolls and the orange juice. And I kind of looked around and I was like, well, I'm going to keep my mouth shut because I don't want, I don't know what is commonplace. I've only really been an administrator one spot before. I don't know what's typical. And our whole group is like, yeah, that sounds good. And I think I asked, it was either in that meeting or later that week, I said, well, do you want me to pitch in $10, $20? And somebody told me, nope, we're going to use our school credit card. Don't worry. Put your money away. We don't need to do more than that. I went back to my office and I thought, that's all I learned for 4 years from the previous secretary, like, make sure you're showing appreciation. And just like those secretaries that we worked with in the previous school, the secretaries at this new school I worked at were also just worked really hard, would do anything I, asked them to, just really helped our school run. And for us just to say we're going to give them donuts and rolls and juice, again, some people might say, what's the issue? That's how it goes in schools. You just do those little things. And it just rubbed me the wrong way. And I had a bad taste in my mouth. And what I did is behind everybody else's back, I had a secretary that was mostly assigned to me. And behind everybody's back, I was like, I got to do more than just rolls and donuts and juice. Like, I've got to get her a gift card. So I went out and got her a gift card. It might have been $50. I don't know. This was 2012-ish. I don't know the amount. It might have been $25. It might have been $50. I can't remember. But I ended up getting her, I knew she had some pets that she adored. And I think she had some fish that she just got. So either way, I went to like PetSmart and got her a gift card and wrote her a note and said, hey, like, thank you for everything that you're doing. You're a rock star. I love your personality. She had a great personality. Like, to this day, people know this lady who works in this office had an amazing personality and just was always in a great mood. And I just showered her with compliments in this letter or this note and gave her that gift card. And you would have thought, I hid it on her desk that morning of the Friday before winter break. And when she found it, you would have thought like she'd won the lottery. It was just crazy. Like, she made it sound like she'd never gotten something like that before, or never, something as thoughtful as that. And I'm sure it was a combination of the card that I wrote and the gift card, but she made it sound like this was the first time she ever really got like a decent gift. And I couldn't believe it. And the more and more like I asked, okay, let me back up. I also started giving, that was the first year. I just gave the gift to the secretary and the card. Then the next year, I was like, you know what? That feels good. I like doing those things. I need to get back to what I learned in my previous job from that secretary and from that principal that was her husband about really making sure people feel appreciated. And so I started, writing notes and giving little gifts, not very big, but just little gifts to everybody who I worked closely with. And in that position, I worked closely with our counselors, the other administrators, the secretaries, and our instructional coaches. It ended up being like a dozen people. And I wrote them notes and gave them, I think it might have been like lottery tickets. It wasn't much. It might have been like $5 or $10 in lottery tickets. I can't recall. But again, I got this response from them that like you would have thought I gave them the keys to a new car. I don't know, but they were just like super thrilled. Like I didn't see when they opened it, but when they came in like to my door and said thank you, it was almost like they were in tears. And I'm like, gosh, it's so easy. It feels good on my end to give the gifts. It doesn't take much effort. It doesn't really cost much money, but yet I'm making these people's day. And the more I kind of like talk to them, and like I mentioned earlier, talk to the secretary, it's like these things were not happening in that school. This was the first time they had really received a gift and a note of appreciation in quite some time, which was hard to believe. So I started like, and as the years have gone on, and now here it is, 2021, I've kind of just felt people out in the different places I've been and talked to different administrators and written this blog like I did last week. There is something there, something that could be said about school leaders, school administrators not taking the time to give the staff that they oversee the closest any meaningful gifts or words of appreciation, or when they do it, it's very, um, it's not very heartfelt, or it's just, it feels forced. So, let me go look at my notes here real quick. I'm kind of on a roll here, but again, it's that the more I talk to, the more I write, listen, talk to our staff here in this district, put stuff out on on social media. I really feel like we've got this issue in schools where we just, for whatever reason, we just have this mentality, this scarcity mentality where, in schools, things are tight. There's always tight budgets. There's not enough money to do this or that. It just kind of carries over to our gift giving. Now, we will never be like the private world, the nonprofit world. And it's just crazy, some of these things that businesses give their employees, these bonuses. We will never be like that. It's just, but we can, I think as leaders, and that's the point of this show and of the point of my of the post, is we need to stop making each other look bad. And we need to start like spending a little bit of money. And I'll get into kind of a mindset here in a second, but let's do some nice things for the staff that we oversee. So I'm going to talk for the last little bit here. I'm just going to kind of cover a few things that were covered in the blog and just explain those a little bit more. You've probably already heard this throughout this, what I've explained, but, gift giving must happen in the context of a positive, healthy relationship. So a couple things that I think of there are, if you're not doing the little things throughout the year, the little ways of showing appreciation, gift giving means nothing. So you really can't just give gifts without doing the other things throughout the year. And there are some bosses who do that 365 days of the year, or 364 days, I should say, that one other day they give the gift. The other days, they don't seem to care at all about the employee. And then finally, either on that birthday or on that holiday, or like Christmas, they finally give something. And they might give a gift, but they say happy holidays and they say their name. If that, they might just say their name. So if you're don't have a healthy relationship to start, you can't possibly, that the gift's not going to be meaningful, right? There's this book out there called The 5 Languages of Appreciation in the Workplace. And it's by the same authors of the 5 Love Languages. And they really take those 5 languages and they apply them to the work setting. And they do a bunch of research on the types of appreciation that make the most impact in school settings. And Guess where giving gifts ranks? There's 5. Well, giving gifts ranks 4th. So first is words of affirmation. That's saying things and writing things and saying like how good you are, at your job and giving them confidence. That's the number one. Number 2 is spending quality time with employees. Making sure and I would encourage you to go check out my blog because I write about the importance of spending time with staff and having those weekly one-on-ones we have here in our district. And then acts of service is the next one down. So first place is words of affirmation for what employees like. Second place is getting quality time with their boss. Third is acts of service. So, and again, it's been a while since I've read that book, but I believe it's if the employee needs some help on a project or needs some assistance with something, that the boss would assist that employee with those things. So those 3 areas come ahead of gift giving. So if you're not doing those 3 things first, gift giving really doesn't matter. The 5th thing is a weird one, and I don't even really want to mention it, but it's physical touch, which that's just kind of weird in the workplace in today's world. I soapbox for just 1 second. I feel like the 5 love languages, people wanted really hard to write a book about workplace appreciation and didn't know what to do with physical touch and threw it in there. And that is a distance 5th. And I guess that means like hugs or high fives, or I don't know what that really means exactly, but that's 5th. So let's put that one away for a second. Really, gift giving comes in towards the bottom of what employees really like. And when polled, only 6% of employees said gift giving was their number one thing they like to get. So that's not a very high percentage. However, here's my thing is I feel like it shouldn't be the main part of your arsenal in terms of all the things you're doing to show appreciation. But when you can do a well-timed gift and include that in the many things that you're doing with appreciation, you can just kill it in terms of really building a relationship and really setting yourself apart from past bosses and future bosses. When you do put in those timely gifts and give those timely gifts to your staff. So what I said, one of the lines I put in the blog post was this: in short, gifts should be viewed as a small yet potent type of ammo in the leader's employee appreciation arsenal. So don't think that's the only thing. I want to make sure I'm clear. Like, gift giving should not be the only thing, but if you're get good at it, and we're going to talk about some things, like I think it can really take your relationship to the next level. Okay. So some steps to remember. I've got 6 steps to remember here. And again, and you can read this. You can read this in the blog, and maybe we just pause real quick so I get a drink of water. This is episode 46. Going solo tonight. Jenny Risner at Ames, Superintendent Ames, could not join me. She's feeling under the weather, so I'm going solo tonight. But I had some great response to a blog I posted a couple days ago called "Don't Be a Cheap Boss." Some people said it really resonated, not just educators, but people across all sectors. Either they were a boss or they had maybe a cheap boss, and it just seemed like I could be onto something here. So I wanted to just expand on this a little bit. So let me get a drink of water here real quick, and then I'll talk about some steps to remember. Okay. So here's the first step to remember: gift giving. Hopefully I've set the stage. Hopefully you understand at this point. I started off cheap. I grew up in a cheap household. Money was tight, as it is for many educators growing up, many educational leaders. I entered administration being very tight with my money. I realized that there's other people out there who were not so tight, and they get over it, and they're like, hey, I want to show appreciation to the people who are working their butts off in our schools that maybe don't get those extra perks. So I had that mind shift switch. Then as I've gone on, I've realized that that mentality that I had is commonplace in a lot of other districts and with a lot of leaders out there. So my goal is to shift the mindset of our leaders so that you really stop making us look bad, because I do think there's a perception out there that a lot of leaders are cheap and they're making other school leaders look bad. So here's 6 steps to remember with gift giving in schools. The first one is, and this one got a lot of retweets and likes on Facebook and Twitter, because I wrote this out separately. When individuals move into supervisory roles, they must assume a portion of their salary will go back to the school, to employees, organizations, or fundraisers. While it's hard to put a number on this contribution, between 1 and 5% is a good rule of thumb to follow. What that means is, and again, I warned you at the beginning, I said we're going to have to use some numbers here. So say, to make things super easy, I'm going to use $100,000 a year. Okay. So let's say a school leader is making $100,000 a year. That means that 1% of your, between 1 and 5% of your salary, between $1,000 and $5,000, you should assume will go back into your school, your employees, your organizations. Some of you might think, oh my gosh, $5,000, that's a lot. Now remember, that's on the high end. I mean, that's a range I'm giving you. But if you add up all the gifts that you give, all the fundraisers that you do, and in schools, we do all kinds of fundraisers. There's fundraisers coming into the office, even though we're away from the school here in our office, there's still like a fundraiser going through our office like once every 2 weeks. And it's just part of being a leader is you almost always should participate in those fundraisers. Again, you don't want to get that stigma of being cheap. Now, I'm not saying you need to do every single one, but more often than not, you should be willing to do those things. Think about here as a district leader, think about the different, there's booster clubs. We have an activities booster club. We have a music booster club. We have a scholarship foundation. As a leader, you need to be willing to open up your, I don't know if pocketbook is the right term anymore, but you need to be willing to spend some money and to really give back to your organization. Again, here's where it gets tricky. And I just want to go on a limb for a second, is people know how much you make. And usually as a school leader, you're making 2, 3, 4, even 5 times as much as your employees. And if you're not willing to spend a little money in those different areas, whether it's organizations, fundraisers, and gifts, I just think you're sending the wrong message. And again, everybody has their different philosophy, but in schools, we are nonprofit organizations, and we just need to have a mindset where we're giving back. We get so much, we are so fortunate in our jobs to get the money we get, the perks that we get, have the flexibility, which as a school administrators is really nice. You just have to have that mindset where you're giving back 1 to 5% of your salary to different things around your school or your district. Okay, let's keep going here. Simple. The next thing is simple. We all know some of the best gifts are minimal in value. Leaders should learn the interests of the people they oversee. Something as basic as surprising employees with their favorite snack or drink is simple yet effective. So this is something that I've done here the last 3 years, is we do a beginning of the year survey with all the people who I oversee. And I think this is kind of trickled down into some of our buildings, but at the beginning of the year, I ask all the people I oversee which is the office staff here, which is like 7 staff members, and then all of our administrators and directors, which is another like 12. So about 18, 19 people. I asked them, what what's your spouse's name? What's your kids' names? What's your pets' names? What's your favorite snack? What's your favorite drink? And there's a reason we do that. And the first thing is I don't know about you, but I'm terrible at remembering spouse names and kids' names. So I like to have a little, and so when I say a survey, we do it through Google Docs. I know that's kind of electronic. That's kind of, that's maybe a little impersonal, but we do a Google Docs and they fill it out. And then we'd have like a contest where I'm jumping around, but we all try to learn each other's spouses' names and kids' names so that we're really connected to one another. And if you want this survey, just let me know, message me on Twitter or Facebook or email, and I'll share it with you. But we have this like beginning of the year meeting, and we have this big quiz where I give away lottery tickets to the person who best memorizes their colleagues' spouses' names and kids' names and pets' names. Because sometimes you don't have kids like me, so you don't want to be left out. So you do pet names, and it's just a ton of fun. We take it to the next level. We have presentations of family and pets. And again, I could go on it's a lot of fun, but it's a way for the group to remember spouse names, kids' names, and pet names. But along with that, remember how I asked them what their favorite snack and drink was. Well, we share that with our group, the group I'm meeting with, and then they know if I'm at Casey's or I'm at Quick Star or whatever gas station it is in the place you live, if it's BP or QT or Quick Trip or 7-Eleven, whatever it is out there. I forget what Dr. Young said last week, Moto Mart or something like that. Whatever your gas station is, if you know that little snack that your colleagues like, if you bring that back to them, sometimes that can make their day. Because here's what happens, and this happens all the time, is I will go to the gas station or the grocery store, and I'll text the group, our office staff, and I'll say, hey, does anybody want anything? And I think it's a differences in generations, but I think the younger generation is like, heck yeah, I'll take something. Give me a Monster and give me a Slim Jim or something. I'm just making that up. That was kind of stupid, but the older generation in our office almost always says, no, I'm good. I think it's the differences in generations of like, not if that's like, we don't buy gifts for each other. So instead of like relying on them to tell you, why don't you beat them to the punch and ask them at the start of the year what their favorite snack is and their favorite drink is? So instead of asking and them feeling bad about you buying them something, when you're at the gas station or grocery store, like you have their list, it's on your phone. So you can, oh, she likes a Diet Dr. Pepper and he likes Skittles. And then this person likes trail mix, whatever it is. So having those little things and going back to the simple, if you know their favorite snack or their favorite drink, and if it's 2:00 in the afternoon and those afternoons drag on, but you come back and you lay that Diet Dr. Pepper on their desk or that cappuccino on his desk, that can make their afternoon. And that just endears you to the staff that you oversee. So never underestimate. I know I talked about some bigger gifts earlier. Never underestimate the simple little gifts that you can buy people throughout the year. Again, for some of you, I'm preaching to the choir. You're already doing these things, but I'm willing to bet there are people out there who they don't currently do this, or they're aspiring leaders and their bosses don't currently do this for them. And this will give you a leg up on some of those other leaders. The next thing, delegation. Expecting one person to assume sole responsibility for recognizing all staff members is not feasible, especially when gifts are involved. To ensure all employees are properly acknowledged, leaders must delegate employee appreciation throughout the building. So when I was a high school principal, there was about 220 staff in our building. In our district here, we've got about 250 staff. It is almost impossible. It is impossible for me to be the one person that is giving gifts to all these people. It's just not possible. Here's what I do. Let's just use the holidays, for example. The holidays, I make sure that every direct report that I oversee gets a gift. This year, I gave every direct report a $50 gift card to a restaurant. Again, some people might give more than me. Some people might give less than me. And I'm not here to say like, you've got to do that much or more, or look at me. I'm just saying I have a mindset where every direct report is going to get a $50 gift card to a restaurant, along with a handwritten note saying how much I appreciate what they do for the district. Again, for me, I think that was about 16 people. So just do the math. You can do the math. That took a little while to do. But what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to teach our leaders to do the same thing for the people that they oversee. So I would hope that our building principals are doing that for their direct reports, meaning their instructional coaches, their department chairs. And then those department chairs are doing it for their staff, the teaching staff that are in their departments, or that head custodian is doing it for the custodians, or that head food service manager in that kitchen is getting it for their kitchen staff. I'm not saying that's happening, but through me modeling it to our staff, by me writing these posts and sharing some of these ideas, I'm hopeful that that idea trickles down. Now, we do have other ways of getting small gifts to our staff. We do appreciation week gifts. We do door deliveries. We do a lot of stuff where we're giving small things to our staff. But in terms of those heartfelt comments and gifts, I think as a leader, you've got to model and you've got to give ideas and hope that you've got the right staff in place who will start doing that for their staff. So again, you've got to delegate. You've got to kind of set up those layers of leadership. If you don't have those layers of leadership in that organizational chart in your district, you might want to start there first. Because right now, if it's just the one principal and 50 staff, and that's the only chain of command, you probably have a little bit of a chain of command issue. So start thinking about delegating. Let's talk about two different groups here real quick. Secretaries and custodians. I said it before, I'll say it again. Secretaries, especially highly effective secretaries, are worth their weight in gold. They make or break you as a leader. That's a strong statement, but having a highly effective secretary is just massive. So principals, assistant principals, anybody with a secretary, please do me a favor. Make sure you are showing them they are valued. Here's what I wrote. Most administrators make 3, 4, or even 5 times as much as secretaries. If there's one person to spend some cash on, it's your assistant. So again, I'm not saying like I got it all figured out. There's probably I probably could do better thing to show appreciation. I have heard from secretaries that they appreciate the things I've done, and maybe I've gone above and beyond, but I always make sure to get a gift for holidays, for their birthday, for Secretary's Day, Admin Assistant Day, and then other times throughout the year. Maybe when they've had a big project that came and went and they just nailed it, and there's a lot of data reports that it's almost ridiculous what the state makes us turn in. But anytime they've crossed a big hurdle and they've done a big project, I always try to find something that I can give to them. And again, a lot of times just a gift card. I could probably do a little bit better in those regards. I'm probably a really bad gift giver, but you would not believe the response I get. And again, for those of you that do the same things I do, I'm sure you're nodding your head and saying, yes, our secretaries, the people before we've got there have not really done much for them. And it is noted. It is appreciated when we are giving them some things that are of value. Custodians, because do not forget custodians. And, usually a building has 3, 4, 5, 6 custodians, depending on the size of the building. Please make sure that you're recognizing them. It can be easy to forget them at times. Just for whatever reason, you're always around your secretary. You're always around the counselors or the instructional coaches or or just that group. But the one I wrote down, the one you cannot forget is the person who cleans your office. There's always one custodian who is assigned to your office. Make sure you are showing them appreciation and giving them a gift when it comes to especially the holidays. Again, I get the feeling, I could be wrong, I haven't talked to every single custodian who cleans a boss's office out there. I get the feeling that often they're forgotten and often they're not given anything during those. And it just kills me because they're the person who clean up after you. I mean, they're the person who are spending time cleaning up your mess, vacuuming, cleaning your desk, whatever it is. The least you could do is show them appreciation. Finally, school funds. Okay, I've talked about school funds before. Here's kind of my philosophy on this, and you might think differently. I talked about how our school, the high school I worked at, used school funds to purchase those rolls and donuts and that juice for the conference room. I wrote this: most of the time, gifts should come out of the boss's pocket, but there are times when school funds could be used to reward groups of staff members. This is perfectly acceptable as long as purchases are made in such a way that keeps the auditors happy. Again, I've talked about this before. I talked about this in a previous podcast. But there's a lot of confusion in schools about how you can use public funds to reward employees. And there are times, and again, I encourage you to go back to listen to that top 10 culture hacks episode where I talk about this. As long as you're being clear, you've got it written in policy and you're being careful about your purchases, you can buy gifts of appreciation for groups of people. It's definitely an allowable use. So for people who are out there who say like, well, we can't buy food or we can't buy gifts or whatever it is, that's not correct. At least here in Iowa, I don't know every state's rules, but I believe in most states, you are good to do this every once in a while. There are times when you can do some appreciation things for staff, for groups of people, where you're buying food or you're buying small gifts. However, I would say if you're buying those individual gifts, and I should back up, gift cards are almost always off limits. So is clothes. So gift cards and clothes are almost always off limits when it comes to using school funds. However, food and some other like personalized, school merchandise can be used, and some other, there's lots of things you can buy using school funds, but go back and listen to that episode. But like I said, most of the time, school leaders should open their pockets and purchase some items for their staff. Covered a lot of stuff here. So let me recap that real quick. Again, I feel like there's a public perception out there that school leaders are cheap. There's just a scarcity mentality in terms of funds for doing things for staff in schools. So leaders need to always look for those opportunities to reward their staff and show them that they're doing a job well done. Again, everybody knows, it's in the papers. It's public knowledge how much leaders make. And oftentimes it's a lot more than teaching staff, paras, support staff. So you can earn a lot of respect by opening up your pocketbook and purchasing gifts for people to show that they're appreciated. And again, like I said before, if you're not doing other things of appreciation, forget about it. One of the cheesiest things is treating an employee like crap and then giving them a gift card and thinking all is good. Like, it's only going to backfire, and people are going to, it's only going to backfire on you. So don't do that. But if you are doing all those other things along the way, and you start to add the gift giving to your repertoire, is that how you say it? Repertoire. Then you can really build some strong relationships. So start, please. I'm just begging you to start. You can take it from me, who used to be cheap, wouldn't go to Ja Rule for $5, wouldn't go to the bars for $5, whatever you want to say. Had to have a coupon for those pizzas. I think it was like, $5.99 pizza from Papa John's. And if I didn't have it, forget about it. We got ripped off. It's a long story. I'm sorry. But please, you take it from me, somebody who was cheap and was made fun of, to now hearing it. I've shared the stories. I've heard it from people. I know what's going on out there. Just step up your game a little bit and spend that 1 to 5% of your salary on your staff and in your schools. Finally, how do I know this is effective? I don't know for sure. I got a good sense of things, but let me say this. Last year, I received a message from a secretary who I supervised several years ago. And it was a Facebook message. It was around the holidays, and the message read this, and I copied and pasted it. I remember when you used to write us cards and give us a lottery ticket for Christmas. I want you to know that I always look forward to that. And it was just a little thing I would write. And she was a secretary not assigned to me, way on the opposite side. Like, our paths didn't cross very often, but I always wanted to do something. So I knew she liked lottery tickets and always played the lottery. So I gave her like a $5 or a $10 lottery scratch ticket. And I didn't think much of it, but that was, 7 years ago, 8 years ago, that I used to do that for her. And I get the feeling like she would not have messaged me if this was commonplace. My gut is telling me this is not commonplace for her. And just those little things matter so much that 7, 8, 9, 10 years later, she would reach out to me and say, hey, this made a difference. So I'm going to get going here. I hope you enjoyed this, this solo episode. That song by Jason Derulo, Riding Solo. I need to add that somehow to the, it's a good song, and I need to add that to the, to the show here, but, riding solo tonight. I promise to be back next week with a guest, but again, I hope you appreciated me just, sharing that, some thoughts that I wrote about the other day. Again, go back and read that blog post, share it with others if you think others should check it out. And again, I just please help help give us leaders a good name, and let's start doing some nice things for our employees. So that's it for episode number 47 of the Group Project Podcast. I'm your host, Jared Smith. Please check out my website, drjaredsmith.com. We've almost hit 25,000 visitors to the website, which is exciting. I just have really had a great time just sharing some of my thoughts and connecting with the audience from all over the United States. If you like what you listened to tonight, please just go down. Just if you're listening on Apple Podcast, take 5 seconds, scroll to the bottom of the episode. You can rate the episode and just type in that 5-star review. We're getting more, when you Google search the Group Project Podcast, it's showing up a lot higher in the feeds because of those 5-star reviews. So again, hope you had a good episode. Hopefully you had a couple things that resonated with you. And we'll be back here next week on the Group Project Podcast.